Good evening and welcome to the January 17th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting, please. Roll call.
Chair Biasotti.
Here.
Vice Chair Kayal.
Here.
Commissioner Chase. Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Mishra. Commissioner Peterson. Here. And Commissioner Samud.
Here.
Great, thank you.
All right. And Commissioner Johnson, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Item 1, approval of the minutes for December 20th, 2016. Evening, Barry.
I move that we approve the minutes of December 20th, 2016.
Through the chair.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the minutes are approved. Item 2, communications.
Chair Biasotti, there are no additional communications this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the commission on items that are not on the agenda? Yeah, if you would step to the podium and give us your name.
Hello, my name is Lila. I live on Linden Avenue, and I'm reading a note that Gail Williams wrote regarding to Victory Honda. And this is dated January the 16th, and she wrote, "To whom it may concern. Over the years, we had many complaints through letters, phone calls, email to the city. All those issues are still ongoing today. The list of complaints include employees parking on Linden, constant use of the loudspeaker system, parking cars in the memory lane path on Linden Avenue side. This impedes access for anyone using the stroller, walker, scooter, or wheelchair. Employees taking smoke breaks in a group on Linden, leaving butts on the sidewalk and in the gutter. Their working hours. The service bay is open with bright lights, noise on and off all day, possibly from the compressor. They open as early as 7 a.m. and close maybe at 10 p.m., but sometimes as late as midnight. Neighbors have spoken to the employee, reminding them they are not to park on Linden, and the response has always been the same. No one at Honda told us we cannot park here. When we have told car carriers they are not to park on the red zone, they always say, "Too bad. Honda told us we can't park here." Once, a very rude driver said, "If you did not like it, you should move." I have emails still in my sent box from as far back as 2010 addressing our complaints. And these are the following people she has sent it to: Tony Padilla, U. Mahara, Matt Newbaumer, M. Sullivan, Aaron Aknin, and I can't pronounce this last name, so therefore I spell it. The initial is D, then AXIAQ. And she said, "Thank you, Gail Williams." I'd like to share, I can agree with her. I moved in 2004, and I sent endless photos to Tino Padilla. They're parking, and they park 11 hours. And I have a 2-space parking in front of my home, and lately their employee parked right in the middle, a Jeep, mind you, and it blocks, you can't even park another car. So I'm just sharing that I have approached Honda, and they said that every new employee packet are given a notice that they're not to park in Linden. So what Gail's saying and what I heard is contradicting. And this has been going on for 12 years for me. So I find this, I'm at wit's end, so I just want to share this.
Thank you. So hang on before the next person speaks. David, can we make some notes to maybe follow up with code enforcement for this?
Yes, I'm taking down notes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, please go ahead. Your
Hey,
name and
My name is Maria Berry, and I also live on Linden Avenue, and I just want to agree with everything that was just stated. The Victory Honda dealership isn't interested in coexisting with the neighborhood. They have lowered our quality of life. They're not cooperative at all. It's very frustrating and ongoing. The litter, the bad attitudes, the parking in front of our homes when they're not supposed to be there, and just their belligerent disregard for anything that the rules that they're supposed to be following.
thank you.
Good evening, commissioners, staff, neighbors. I've prepared remarks, so I would like to read them. My name is Callista. My husband and I live on Poplar Avenue, and I'm just one of many, there's only some of the neighbors here tonight, who form a loosely organized, though broad-based and growing coalition of neighbors who are interested in reviewing the status of conditional use permit 01-55, permit holder Victory Honda at 345 El Camino Real. We actually have been, as the neighbors have been saying, submitting a number of complaints and photos, et cetera, and Matt Newbaumer, who apparently is the associate planner, who's frankly been very generous with his time and taking my calls and allowing me to bend his ears, has been trying to solve the technical issues of us being able to submit to the city violation photos, which I have basically collected and I've just put on a thumb drive and we've given to Michael to basically substantiate. Please do go through once they are uploaded.
Through the chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just missed something you said. Could you repeat it? You said what the title of this thumb drive is?
The thumb drive is a compilation of photos that have been collected from various neighbors
And
regarding parking on Memory Lane, red zone parking, various violations that we are observing and
Okay,
suffering
thank
at
you.
the hands of Victory Honda. So the last time I understand that this body, the Planning Commission, reviewed and approved this CUP 01-55 was November 18th, 2003. At that time, of course, it was Grace Honda, and now Victory Honda has successor interest. Please confirm that the meeting notes where City Attorney Thompson indicated that a review would not automatically come back to the commission. I believe one of the commissioners had asked about that, but that it could be added. Therefore, a 17th condition to their use permit was added, that being a 6-month review as a condition of approval. That was 2003. And to our knowledge, and we had asked planning and we had also asked the city attorney, has this ever been reviewed? Because there's been years and years of complaints. It's cost the neighborhood plenty and frustration, which is especially egregious because we have lots of evidence and the city appears to have allowed this to continue. So none of us would be able to operate outside of any of the permits, and we're hoping that we can impress upon you that everybody should be equal in front of this and you'll take us seriously. So on January 3rd, we submitted a formal notice of complaint to code enforcement and requested that they do a comprehensive compliance review of permit 0155, Victory Honda. And it was, the response we got back was, I think on the 6th, and Matt Newbaumer, who is the associate, said that staff would open a code enforcement. And because the goals, of course, was to bring them into compliance, and that would be fantastic. However, we assert the permit holder has exhibited persistent abuse, chronic lack of compliance to the community's detriment, and the city has not enforced it. It's the 17th of January. We don't have confidence that the permit holder is, if they've been asked to comply, that they've actually been coming into compliance, because we continue to see a number of what we believe are condition violations. Actually, as my husband and I walked home from dinner on the avenue the other night, just 2-3 nights ago, we had to walk around a trash receptacle which was parked on Victory Honda's property across Memory Lane. I have photos, but I think I forgot to submit that. And I wonder what the merchants on the avenue would think about another merchant in San Bruno who chronically conducts their operations in a way that inhibits the unfettered pedestrian passage on the precise public right-of-way pathway that brings customers to their doors on the avenue. Therefore, I don't know how this goes. We would like them to come into compliance, but if it's like playing whack-a-mole and they are consistently not, then may we request a revocation of permit action against Victory Honda for chronic noncompliance, for missing, I don't know if it's the entirety of the conditions, but at least a significant number. We would like it publicly reviewed. We would like, I don't know how you look into this, but I kind of feel like we have said this, we have asked this, we're not getting a response. Frankly, we would like to have the whole thing reviewed again, and either they need to prove it or lose it. And furthermore, we would ask that there be some mechanism that the neighbors do not have to be continually at the mercy of a very disrespectful permit holder in San Bruno, and that we are obliged to beg code enforcement that the rules that this body sets for them, that these conditions that they're respecting. So we look forward to hearing what the next steps will be. Thank you so much for taking my notes.
Thank you.
My name is Yosem Kumpanj. First name is like Yosemite. Last name is it's just a company with an S. So I'm always confused for a corporation. So if I ever send you mail, it's actually a person, not a company that's writing to you. I actually just recently moved into this neighborhood, and I saw that there are a number of meetings planned. There's city council meeting, there's a planning commission, and this is going to be completely different from the kind of discussion that we've been having thus far, but I just really want to understand the basics. If someone could tell me what is the purpose of this planning commission? Like, what exactly does it do? If that's okay. I'm sorry if it's a very basic question, but.
No, it's all right. Actually, David, would you?
I'd be happy to respond to the question. So the Planning Commission, the San Bruno Planning Commission, is here to provide guidance to the community on a broad range of issues. One of the areas that it does work in is to work with the City Council in maintaining the city's overall general plan or comprehensive plan for how the community will grow over time in terms of various land uses, utilities, etc. So the physical growth of the community, the Planning Commission works with the City Council and the broader community to come up with an overall comprehensive plan for future growth. The Planning Commission also works on a variety of other things as well. So for example, as the city works to develop a more specific plan for areas of the community, like a specific plan for a particular area of San Bruno, the Planning Commission will work with staff and the community to develop an overall more detailed plan of a particular area, referred to oftentimes as a specific plan. The most recent example of that is where the Planning Commission worked with the broader community through about a 4-year effort and the City Council to develop the city's transit corridors plan for the downtown area and corridors in that area, describing what the vision would be for the community in terms of land uses, design, development standards, etc. The Planning Commission also works with the City Council. It's advisory, generally speaking, to the City Council in the area of the city's capital improvement program. So as we look at spending city dollars on major capital improvements, the city's planning commission will review the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program, to make sure that our expenditures for, say, utility improvements, other capital improvements, buildings, et cetera, conform with the general plan. The general plan is the basic planning document of the community. So general plan, specific plan, zoning code, capital improvement plan, those are areas that the Planning Commission works in. In addition, as you may see later on this evening on a particular item, with all those policy documents in place and codes, the Planning Commission will actually review individual applications by private property owners or developers to develop sites in accordance with the general plan, specific plan, zoning code, CIP, other policy and code documents of the community. So the Planning Commission fulfills a very, very important role here in this community in terms of helping guide our future growth here in San Bruno. So I hope that gives you an overview. Thank you.
Cool. Very good. And actually, those documents that he was talking about, the general plan, the transit plan, all of those are available on the city website if you'd like to spend some time and review those and read through those. But all that information's out there for the public to review as well. Okay? You're very welcome.
And through the chair, if I could, if the gentleman would be interested in meeting with staff, I'd be happy to meet personally or have a staff person meet with him to review in more detail this information or to show him some of our planning documents.
You're very welcome. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the commission? Please.
All right. Good afternoon or good evening to the Planning Commission and to city staff. My name is Steve Seymour, and I'd like to, my comments in the open session here right now are coming based on what David just talked about. I live on Mastic Avenue, and at the top of Mastic Avenue is 406 through 418 San Mateo Avenue. And I'd like for the Planning Commission to do everything they can in the future when you're approving buildings such as that to make sure that there are enough parking spaces. That building has 83 units, and most of them are 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, or 3-bedroom units. There are 106 parking spaces for that building. And so what's going to happen inevitably, because based on the number of units that are there, there'll be between 150 and 200 people that live in that building. And like you, and probably everyone in this room and everyone in the city, we would like to see more people walking. We'd like to see people outside of their cars. We'd like to see people on bicycles. But unfortunately, I don't see that happening to the extent that it would need to, so that there wouldn't be any cars in that building not on the public streets. And the public streets in the heart of San Bruno are already overwhelmed with cars, to the point where it's unsafe for many of us. My friend Steve here, Steve, when he's moving around the streets, he is often, even not at the highest point when everyone's parked, he's having to move himself into the street around cars, blind spots. And he has to worry. I mean, he doesn't have the sight of vision that you or I have. That's just one example, but you know, there's a lot of people in the neighborhood that have been there for 40 or 50 years, and they may not be as steady on their feet as we are. They also have a problem. Women or fathers that are pushing strollers, they have a problem. We already are overwhelmed with cars in that neighborhood. And later on in the public, or in the, when you talk about accessory dwelling, I'm going to speak again. But I implore you all to do what you can moving forward when you approve these buildings to make sure there's enough parking so that our sidewalks and streets remain safe. That's my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Peterson.
I'd like to ask the speaker a question. Could I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
You say make sure there's adequate parking. What, in your view, would adequate parking be?
Well, honestly, I feel that that question is a question that I can give you my opinion, but I do think it's a question that needs to take some time for the Planning Commission and for the city and for the residents to make that decision. I do not by any means think that I'm the right person to make that decision. But I'll tell you, this is the way I look at it. There's probably 150, first of all, in most one-bedrooms, there's 2 people living with 2 cars. So I don't remember the exact numbers right now, but I think there are 32 bedrooms, 8 3-bedrooms, and another 30 or 41 bedrooms, and then some studios. So if we just take the mix and we say of the 86 spots that there will be 2 cars in each one, which is not unreasonable, especially when you have to think about what a lot of people do today now for employment. It's very difficult to live in the Bay Area, and so a lot of people are padding their salaries by driving for Uber and Lyft and other car share. So probably 160, 170 people in the building. Let's say that some of them come. I just recently met a couple that moved here from Quebec, and they came to the U.S. and they're working up here at YouTube, and they don't have any cars. But that's not the norm right now. 160. I don't think it's unreasonable to think there's probably 150 cars in there. And I think it's very disrespectful to our neighborhoods that even one of those cars would come out onto our public streets when they are already overwhelmed. So if there are 150 cars and there are 106 spots, we can expect 34, maybe more cars to go onto streets, and that parking does not exist today. The other issue, which is also a planning commission issue, I believe at some point, you have public parking lots back there on Mastic. They can only hold so many cars. They are not the answer to the parking problems that we have today in our city. What would be an answer would be some kind of parking garages. Maybe we don't bring them up, but we bring them down. Whatever it might be, but there's got to be some answer before we start loading more people into these neighborhoods. So I don't know if that, reasonable, 183 units, more than 106, probably 150? That would be my personal request.
Great, thank you.
But I really think it deserves a citywide review to come up with the right answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. David, you look like you had a comment to that, or?
A couple of comments with respect to Mr. Seymour's comments. One, the city of San Bruno is going to be proceeding this coming year, actually over the next couple of months, we'll be initiating work on a comprehensive parking management for downtown. And that comprehensive parking management plan is part of an implementation requirement of the transit corridor specific plan. So over the next 12 months, we will be moving forward with that comprehensive plan and looking at specific needs current and into the future as we look at build out within the TCP area. Thank you.
Excuse me 1 second before you start. I'm going to have to limit you to a couple of minutes because we do need to move along.
All right. It's only a minute.
Thank you.
What I would say in respect to what David just said is, if we don't know what the answer is, then maybe we put it on hold until we do. Instituting a parking plan, trying to figure out what to do with possibly not having an answer to that for 12 months or longer. If we continue to put these structures up and don't put adequate parking in there, you're doing irreparable harm that we'll live with for decades. And so please think of that before you approve any others without the right number of parking spaces.
Thank you. Did you want to speak, sir?
I wasn't ready. Hello? I wasn't ready to speak today. I wasn't going to say anything, but first of all, good evening, Planning Commission. Thank you for, I guess, everybody being here. I live on Linden, 200 block on Linden, and there's no parking, okay? That's okay. I have a driveway, I have a garage, but it's just getting ridiculous. Parking's getting ridiculous, and it's very dangerous as far as for me, You know, Seymour just said that it's hard to get around. There's some corners on Linden Avenue that doesn't have a ADA accessible curb. Okay, so people don't see me at my level. I tend to stay home now more often, and I'm sure some of you guys see me. People at home, I'm sure they've seen me driving up and down Crystal Springs Avenue with the past 4 years, or at pushing myself because I do a lot of exercise. And within the past 6 months, I just haven't. I mean, it's just getting ridiculous. And also, we need blue plaque parking. We need wheelchair accessible parking. Seriously, it's ridiculous. We live in America, and okay. Thank you very much, and have a nice day. And again, I'm speaking for the most vulnerable people of our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ryan Mersney, Keynes Avenue. Over the past so many years, I have heard directly from sitting council members that the reason we have to give parking exemptions and not increase the parking requirements is because developers simply won't come to San Bruno if we don't. Well, by using that basis and logic, we have made ourselves a city where our living standards are going down because of the parking issue. So bringing people in, they claim developers wouldn't come in. Well, today that's no longer an excuse. The land values in the Bay Area everywhere are so valuable, we can no longer give that an excuse. The quality of life is deteriorating. The quality of life in a city helps land values go up. So therefore, I think that we need to address increasing the parking. Now, I don't know what they currently are. I've seen different figures for different neighborhoods, whether it's a single-family home, how many square feet, how many bedrooms, and things like that. But I really think we now have to increase that. Secondly, I'm not going to complain about what has been done, but I'd like us to look at what has been done and realize it failed, and just simply admit we made a mistake in the past, we didn't realize that was going to be the result. Now we need to stop making that same mistake. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the commission? Okay, we'll close public comment and we'll move on to item number 4, conflicts of interest. Anyone? Okay, item 5, 851 Cherry Avenue is a request for a permit for alcohol sales. Staff report, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Megan Woolley Osdahl, and I am an associate planner in the Community Development Department. For your consideration this evening is a request for a use permit to allow alcoholic beverage sales, which includes beer, wine, and distilled spirits, with a Type 47 ABC license in conjunction with an existing restaurant. The restaurant is called Mazat Bistro, and it is located at 851 Cherry Avenue, Suite 15, in the Bay Hill Shopping Center. The applicant is also the owner of Mazat Bistro. He is here tonight, and his name is Adam Chamseen. Mazat Bistro received its business compliance permit in May of 2016 and subsequently opened in July. The restaurant's menu offers Lebanese and Mediterranean dishes. Since the existing restaurant is already a permitted and approved use, Planning Commission approval is only required for the sale of beer, wine, and spirits. If approved, the applicant would also be required to obtain a Type 47 liquor license from the California Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, or ABC. ABC provides Type 47 or general licenses, which allow for the sale of beer, wine, and distilled spirits. And these licenses are restricted in number and only issued once per year. General licenses can also be obtained through inter-county transfer, in which a business purchases the general license from another business, but that's not the case here. The number of businesses issued per county are based on a ratio between the county's population and the existing number of businesses. When there are more applicants than available general licenses, a priority drawing is held to choose the recipients, and in October of 2016, Mazat Bistro was selected through this drawing to receive a general license. The existing restaurant is open from 11 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. Monday through Saturdays. The restaurant has seating for approximately 34 patrons within an indoor dining area and also within a small outdoor dining area. The restaurant does not have a separate bar, and patrons would not be allowed to take alcohol off of the premises. Other nearby uses include Nueve, Jamba Juice, Cafe Grillades, Weight Watchers, Big Mouth Burgers, and Peninsula Beauty. And there are 8 restaurants within the Bay Hill Shopping Center that sell alcohol on site. Thus far, there have been no public comments received regarding this application. Staff is in support of this application because we do not anticipate negative effects from alcohol sales in conjunction with this restaurant. Mazat Bistro functions mainly as a dining establishment, does not operate a separate bar, and closes at 9:30 p.m. Also, alcohol sales are not intended to be the primary source of income for the operator. Rather, they are to be a way to improve the dining experience for his customers and to increase sales. Both the police and the community development departments have placed conditions of approval on the use permit. And if any issues arise, the community development director has the authority to call this item back to the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
Actually, I do. Thank you. Are there any complaints on file for this establishment?
No, there are not.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you. Okay, we'll open up the public comment, and we will ask the applicant to come to the podium and give us a description of what we got going on.
Good evening, everybody. Just going to introduce myself real quick. I was born in Lebanon. I grew up in Sweden, in Stockholm, which is odd. I moved here 16 years ago, and mainly I've been consulting other investors to build restaurants. So I build restaurants from zero, from the constructions up to training staff, training cooks, and training servers. So I've been doing this for a long time. And I'm the first one who introduced the Lebanese kind of small plate tapas in San Francisco. In Hayes Valley, that was my first location. It's still operating until today, back in 2009. And it mainly operates from in the evenings. And I've been selling wine and beer with these locations and for quite a while. And also I had a wine lounge on Van Ness Avenue next to the Opera House, which I sold in 2017, and then I was offered the location here in Bay Hill Shopping Center, the old Quiznos. I built it also turned it to a bistro, and Mazat became Mazat Bistro. That's the name what it came from. Recently moved to San Bruno myself, so I live up in Crystal Spring, here, road. And then Mazat Bistro it was a new addition to the shopping center, and since all my menu, all my items are totally made from scratch, organic, and then we have also served some kebabs and falafel and hummus and all these small dishes, healthy dishes. Customers have mainly asking us to serve, pair it with the wine and beer, and I was planning to bring some Lebanese wine and beer. Also from Napa Valley and internationally, can introduce a line of beer and wine mainly. And also we have a drink called Arak, which is like similar to Ouzo, and that requires a Type 47 liquor license. So that's my sales won't be mainly on hard liquor, more than wine and beer. I would say 80% wine and beer, and maybe 20% make few drinks, key availables to the customers. That would help a lot with the high overhead cost we have in the shopping center. I realized I opened up in July. We've been doing very good. but we are totally on the edge as far as surviving. This is going to be like a win-win situation, introducing a line of wine and beer, and then at least stay in business for quite a while. I'm enjoying it here. I like the city. It's totally calmer than San Francisco, and I hope this won't be an issue for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the applicant? No? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this issue?
I just want to add a question.
Would you step to the podium and give us your name, please?
Just a question, John Lynch. It brings the total, this would bring the total of 9 places you can consume alcohol in a shopping center. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the public who'd like to speak on this issue?
Yeah, Scott Smith, I live on Poplar. We've eaten there a few times, and it's a really nice restaurant. I think it's really well run, and it's quality food, and it's, I see having a glass of wine with dinner as a nice thing. So it's a great addition to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Again, I'm Steve Seymour. I have been to many of the restaurants in Bay Hill Shopping Center, and I would welcome wine and spirits at this restaurant as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close the public comment. We'll move it back to the commission for comments, motions, votes.
Through the chair,
Commissioner.
I move to approve use permit 16-025 based on findings 1 through 5 and conditions of approval 1 through 18.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion is approved, and there's a 10-day appeal period, I believe. Thank you. Good luck. Okay. Item 5B, accessory dwelling units. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Mark Sullivan, Long Range Planning Manager. At your last meeting on December 20th, 2016, you considered proposed amendments to the municipal code related to accessory dwelling units, or ADUs for short. So I'll go in between the two terms. And this is to comply with recently adopted state law. The Planning Commission discussed the proposed amendments to the municipal code, and due to questions about the law's requirements, continued the public hearing until a future meeting. You requested staff to provide an analysis comparing the requirements of state law with the proposed local code amendments, as well as to look into areas where ADUs might be limited. So let me just talk a little bit about the state law. On September 27th, 2016, the governor signed 2 bills into law which regulate accessory dwelling units. The new law mandates that local governments either adopt a local ordinance complying with state law or apply only the state law standards. The law became effective on January 1st, 2016. The law does provide limited allowance for discretion for local agencies in preparing a local implementing ordinance, such as the size of units and number of bedrooms. At that meeting, staff had also proposed adding regulations related to junior accessory dwelling units. But upon further consideration, staff believes that the efficiency unit provision of the state ADU law and also our local requirements already provide sufficient opportunity for this type of small secondary dwelling unit. So we're not including that in the resolution this time. So ADUs provide affordable housing. That's the premise of the state legislation. The intent of the state legislation is to address the current housing crisis, which is statewide, and increase affordable housing opportunities by allowing more flexibility and relaxing regulations for ADUs. Housing has become less affordable, with most market rate housing only affordable people making higher incomes. In San Bruno, the average price of a home rose 64% to $900,000 between 2010 and 2016, and I believe now it's even around $1 million. And average rents have increased during the same period by 63% to about $3,200 per month. The need for affordable housing far exceeds the supply, and the legislature determined that ADUs can provide a valuable form of low-cost housing to help address the state's affordable housing crisis within existing neighborhoods. ADUs can provide housing to different populations, ranging from students and young professionals to young families, people with disabilities, and senior citizens. The proposed amendments to the municipal code would provide the city local control over approval of ADUs to the extent allowed under state law. Now I'm going to summarize the major requirements for ADUs under state law and identify areas where the city has discretion to adapt the local ordinance. So first of all, what is an ADU? An ADU is a secondary unit with complete independent living facilities for one or more persons, and generally takes two forms. One are units that add square footage, and so these units could either be attached to the existing residence or they could be detached separately on the property. And then the second form is an ADU that would be created from existing space entirely within the existing dwelling. So let's look at the general requirements of ADUs, and I'm just going to... So these requirements apply to all types of to both types of ADUs. So the lot must be zoned residential and contain an existing single-family dwelling. The ADU cannot be sold separately, so it must remain with the existing residence as one property. The ADU must comply with building and safety codes. Side and rear setbacks must be sufficient for fire safety. And this is something new that's added by state law, and that is that fire sprinklers cannot be required for a new ADU if they're not already required in the primary residence. And then an ADU created from an internal conversion entirely within an existing residence must have separate exterior access apart from the main entrance. State law also requires ministerial approval or disapproval within 120 days of receipt of an application. And what that means is that there can be no conditional use permit or any other discretionary type of permit, and it must be considered and approved at staff level, and it doesn't go to a public body. Okay, now the next area is where can ADUs be located? What are the permitted areas? So the state law allows jurisdictions to designate areas where ADUs are permitted. However, the ADUs within existing structures must be allowed in all single-family zones. ADUs may be restricted in areas with health and public safety risks, such as having an area having deficient water, sewer, traffic flow concerns, and other public safety conditions. However, local standards should not unreasonably restrict ADUs, so that's a specific requirement. The proposed amendments that we're recommending will require conformance with standards contained in the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan, as well as earthquake standards. So that means that ADUs would not be allowed in areas where there are 70 decibels in the airport noise contour, where the airport noise contour is 70 decibels or above, and in areas where it's 65 decibels, they would need to provide some kind of sound attenuating construction to bring the noise level down to an acceptable level. And so staff has looked into the issue of parking impacts in certain neighborhoods and believes that the city could restrict ADUs in areas where on and off-street parking impacts and street conditions would impede the access of emergency vehicles and potentially endanger public safety. And this areas such as in the avenues or in the Hart neighborhood. Staff is coordinating with the police, fire, and public service departments to identify potential areas. And if this is warranted, staff would return with a proposal to amend the area where ADUs are allowed. And at this time, there is no area of the city which is specifically designated or found to be, unsafe, or there's no sort of factual information that would allow us to do that at this time. But as I said, we're reviewing this with fire, police, and public services. So development standards. For ADUs that require an addition or a new accessory structure, development standards can be established within certain limitations, such as parking, covered separately below, or I'm going to talk about that in a minute, height, setback, lot coverage, landscape, architectural review, and maximum size. ADUs cannot be required to provide fire sprinklers if they're not required in primary residence, which I think I mentioned earlier. So in areas that the city has discretion, the city needs to be careful not to apply standards in a manner that burdens the potential development of ADUs. However, staff does recommend carrying over the development standards of the city's former secondary dwelling unit ordinance to the new ADU requirements, which include lot coverage and floor area ratio standards. So under the former ordinance, if a secondary dwelling unit exceeded certain standards triggering a conditional use permit, then it was not allowed. And we can establish that as well in the proposed ordinance before you. And so that's what we're proposing, to bring forward those provisions. Another thing that the city can do is to prohibit short-term rental of ADUs by requiring the unit to be rented for at least 30 days. This would prevent it from being used as a short-term rental. And now we'll look at minimum and maximum unit sizes. This is an important area because state law sets a maximum size of 1,200 square feet for attached and detached ADUs and allows more than one bedroom. In addition, the state law states that an ADU cannot exceed 50% of the living area of the primary residence, and the size limits established by a local ordinance must permit at least an efficiency unit in compliance with local development standards. So the area where the city has some discretion is that the city can set maximum unit sizes and number of bedrooms. So for example, where the state law, for an attached ADU, where the state law sets a maximum size of 1,200 square feet, we're proposing to set a maximum of 750 square feet. And also that the unit cannot exceed 50% of the existing living area of the residence. For a detached ADU, state law sets a maximum of 1,200 square feet, And again, we would propose 750 square feet. And for an ADU located entirely inside of an existing residence, there's no minimum established by state law, but we would recommend establishing a minimum of 150 square feet. And that the reason for that number is that that's the minimum size for an efficiency unit. And an efficiency unit must be allowed by state law. And an efficiency unit is different from an ADU in that it can have a shared bathroom with the main residence. So it must use one bedroom of the residence, separated for the efficiency unit, and it must have an efficiency kitchen, which is a limited type of kitchen with a small sink and a cooktop and so forth. So now we come to parking standards. This is where the state law is most restrictive. So the state law states that parking requirements shall not exceed one space per unit or bedroom. And as I mentioned, we're proposing a maximum of one bedroom. And the parking may be provided as tandem parking in the driveway. Off-street parking shall be permitted in setback areas or through tandem parking unless specific findings are made that parking in setback or tandem areas is not feasible based on specific site conditions or that is not permitted anywhere else in the city. So staff is proposing that although the city cannot impose parking standards, let me back up there for 1 second. Okay, so let me just backtrack just a little bit. So as I mentioned, it's one space per bedroom or unit is a state law requirement. We're proposing one space per unit. The state law allows tandem parking unless specific findings are made. Our current code does not allow tandem parking, and we can make the finding that tandem parking is not allowed anywhere in the city without a parking exception, so we can restrict, we can not allow tandem parking. And then the third point is that in the case where a garage is converted into an ADU, the state law allows the replacement parking, if it's required, which it would be, to be in any number of configurations, including tandem parking, uncovered or covered parking, or through parking lifts. And our current code, since our current code requires that all single-family homes have at least 2 covered parking spaces, we can continue to require that. So if a homeowner were to propose converting a garage into an ADU, they would need to provide 2 covered spaces someplace on the property. So this part of the law also relates to parking, and it basically states where we cannot require additional parking. The cases where we cannot require additional parking, and that's in 5 instances. One is, and this is really the most significant one, is within 1/2 mile of a public transit stop. 2 is within an historic district. 3 is within an existing primary residence or an accessory structure. Well, actually, the third one is that if the accessory dwelling unit is located in an existing structure, then we cannot require additional parking. If it's within an area requiring on-street parking permits, but they are not offered to the ADU occupant, then we also cannot require additional parking. If the ADU is within 1 block of a car share vehicle, then we also cannot require parking. But those 5, the first one is really the important one, because let me show you a map with the transit stops, including bus stops in San Bruno, which basically cover the entire city. So we would not be able to require additional parking in most of the city for an ADU.
Through the chair, Commissioner, is that also the case where the city's basic requirement is 2 covered spaces minimum, but the dwelling does not have 2 covered spaces?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So they would be permitted to have an accessory unit, even though they only have, say, 1 covered space.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
So the areas where we do have discretion is, as I mentioned, the covered parking spaces. We can prohibit tandem parking. And that's about the extent of it.
You can't even prohibit tandem parking, can you?
Well, we can, because it's not permitted by right anywhere in the city. It requires a parking exception.
Thank you.
So the area of utilities is less sort of the purview of the Planning Commission, but it's an important change. So these are some of the most substantive changes that have implications for building, fire, and utilities that are not reflected in the proposed amendments. But they will be addressed by applicable city departments as appropriate. Some of these changes are that an ADU cannot be considered a new residential use when calculating connection fees or capacity charges for utilities, including water and sewer service. For ADUs created within an existing structure, either a primary residence or an accessory structure, new or separate utility connections or fees must not be required. For other ADUs in attached or detached structures, separate utility connections between the ADU and the utility provider may be required, but any connection fees or capacity charges must be proportionate to the impact of the ADU on either its size, based on either its size or number of plumbing fixtures. And we really have no discretion in that area. In terms of environmental review, the proposed amendments are within the scope of the program EIR for the 2009 general plan, and no further environmental review is required. In addition, adoption of an ordinance to implement this new state law is exempt from CEQA. In terms of consistency with the housing element, the city does have a goal to accommodate regional housing needs and also to ensure availability of affordable housing for seniors, persons with disabilities, single-parent households, and other special needs groups. And it specifically seeks to promote the second unit ordinance, meaning accessory dwelling units, and the housing element also seeks to review development standards to create more opportunities for new second units that are compatible with the neighborhood. So In conclusion, staff believes that the proposed ordinance amendments to establish local rules to regulate ADUs appropriately responds to the goals and programs of the housing element while maintaining compliance with state law. The purpose of the proposed amendments is to obviously to maintain compliance with state law, and staff believes that the ordinance does indeed comply with state law and housing element. As mentioned earlier, staff is investigating areas where there are potential public safety concerns. However, staff recommends that you move forward with support of the ordinance at this time, and staff would return with a proposal to amend the area where ADUs are not allowed, proposing areas where they're not allowed. Alternatively, you could ask staff to continue to research this issue and come back with revisions at the next meeting. However, in the meantime, state law will be in effect, which is more permissive than the proposed code changes in the areas of unit size, number of bedrooms, and other local standards that I discussed earlier. And just so that you, just to update you on the number of proposals we've had, in the past few years, we probably have approved an average of 2 to 3, maybe as many as 5, but I would say average of 2 to 3 secondary dwelling units per year. And so far this month, we have received 5 applications, and there are 4 that are pending. So people are aware of this ordinance and what the state law allows. And so we've seen a definite increase in the number of proposals. So just food for thought. And then one other thing I would like to point out is that in your staff report, in the attachment that contains the proposed amendments, there was an error, and that error has to do with the covered parking spaces in converted parking garages. And so we would propose that if you choose to adopt or to recommend adoption, that we make the change that specifically states that replacement parking in converted garages be allowed only as covered spaces or by the use of parking of mechanical parking lifts. And that concludes my presentation. Be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One is I didn't hear about any language about notification to neighbors.
There is no requirement for notification since it's a sort of an over-the-counter application. There's no public hearing or public review, so there isn't that requirement.
I find that interesting simply because, I mean, it's huge. It's when you have an addition to a house and you're having an extra bedroom put on and they meet all the other criteria, they're within so many distance from a transit and all of those things.
Yeah.
Why would they not apply as a secondary unit, as a dwelling unit versus an addition?
Well, I mean, for one thing, what we're proposing is that if you do exceed standards, and which triggers the conditional use permit, then it would not be allowed as an accessory dwelling unit.
And you've already received 5 applications. I find that, and I understand it's state. Some things we can't do anything about, but I want to raise the questions and have discussion about it. But the not having notification to neighbors is huge. It's huge. I happen to have, unfortunately I couldn't print pictures, but I happen to have a picture of that same situation. And when, I don't know that you can see it from where you are, Mark, but when you see, what you see there, Commissioner Peterson, is a dwelling unit next to the house that they're building. And you can scroll through them, you can see quite a few of them. And with no notification, which is a huge impact. And in this case, I'll disclose the fact that it was next door to my school. And in this case, I'm not opposing the unit, but the notification, just because we are always wanting to propose good neighbor relationships, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So in situations like this, it doesn't create that, and I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned, in my situation, I own a preschool, and it took away, to this day, from now, earlier in the spring, 10 parking spots because of all the trucks and what's taking place, and it's huge. As I say, I'm not opposed to the project, but I just don't think that you can plan efficiently. I mean, there are families that might have a person with special needs, wheelchair, other kinds of things, and I just don't think that it's a reasonable. I'd like to be able to go on record indicating some of those issues. And it just, it's completely a new apartment. It's just incredible to see the level, here's another angle. You can see. Not only is it taking a parking spot off the street when they have the parking that's going to go in front of them between the two dwellings.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a concept that I think that is, it doesn't create. Did you go through a couple of them and see them? This is the one in between. So this is a dwelling, and then this is the house that's actually putting it on. I just find the whole process interesting in that, and I understand the concept, and I understand the whole housing piece in our community. It's just horrific and horrendous. And I don't know that we can do anything about it, but I certainly would like it to be on record that it go back to I like the suggestion of continuing, and I don't know what that'll accomplish, but I certainly will do my part. But at least that there is a committee or there is a focus group to look at these. You have 5 more applications. I'm only one person, and you had 2 to 5 the previous year, and this year in January, you've had 5 already. So potentially, I think there's room for not having good community relationships, and I am concerned about that.
Through the chair, if I could add, the applications that are coming in at this time, as Mark has indicated, are under the state law, and the state law is much more permissive. So these applications that come in can be up to 1,200 square feet. They can be without restriction to number of bedrooms. So what Mark and the staff have done here is to try, as we often do, is to balance interests. On the one hand, we do have a housing crisis that we're all aware of. We also have impacted neighborhoods, which we're all aware of. And so some of the areas of discretion that Mark described had to do with bedrooms. In terms of number of bedrooms we're recommending, it's 1. That's not a change from the previous second unit ordinance that was in place. The previous second unit ordinance allowed up to 640 square feet in terms of area. Instead of the 1,200 square feet, staff is recommending 750 square feet. We're also recommending that there be no short-term rental opportunities. We're also suggesting that in terms of replacement parking, that while the state indicated that replacement parking could be open parking when there's a garage conversion, we're saying no, that we're recommending that the replacement parking be covered parking. So in a number of different areas, we're trying to, on the one hand, abide by the mandate, and this is a state mandate, and you're clear on that. This is a state mandate. We are trying to identify areas where we can balance interests by looking at our parking conditions in our neighborhoods, and yet at the same time look at providing housing. The state law is very clear about notification, It indicates that this is a ministerial act. Ministerial act is without notification. We typically advise, as a matter of practice, that people communicate. We try to do that, but in terms of requiring that, we cannot require that. Those are some general comments that we would make at this point. We'd be happy to respond to any of your specific comments. I would indicate again that people are aware of the state law. They are aware that it's more permissive. We are, as you see from Mark's report, receiving the number of applications in 1/2 month that we received perhaps in an entire year in the past under more permissive standards. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
I have a question. Do our design guidelines come into play on the new structures that?
Correct. So the residential design guidelines would come into play. So at a staff level, keep in mind this is without review. This is not without review, I should say. We do have the residential design guidelines. There essentially is a checklist that would be developed. So if the application comes in, it's 1 bedroom, it's, let's say, 750 square feet, basically meets the criteria in terms of the checklist. We also would be looking at design of the structure itself. And so there would be that review at a staff level. But basically, we would look for general conformance with our design guidelines.
Through the chair. In the midst of that design, they're adding, I mean, I don't know how they can possibly put tandem parking in the place where that this is taking place. But they're also they might create a parking spot on site, but they're also taking a spot off the street because they're having a curb cut. And so it's not necessarily, it's a convenient parking spot for them, but they're taking a spot away from someone else.
I wasn't clear about that in terms of the curb cut. Can you describe that again, please?
So in this particular case, there is a house that there's about 10 parking spots. And now that they built this particular unit,
Yes.
it's a kind of a bit of an upgrade, and they're apparently going to put a parking spot there, and it's quite a large upgrade. Right now, it's a parking spot on the street. When they build that driveway,
Yes.
they're taking that spot off of the street,
Yes.
and so there'll be an entrance to their driveway, but no longer having a street parking space.
Right, I understand that. We should take a look at that because there are some restrictions in terms of modifying curb cuts. So I'm glad you brought that to our attention. I'd like to take a look at that. Thank you.
Is someone on the staff going to make a note on that? That could be a big issue.
I'm making a note on that.
Oh, thank you so much. Through the chair.
Commissioner.
First of all, I want to compliment staff. This report is head and shoulders above the original one in terms of making it clear what's going on and getting rid of the junior accessory units, which was nothing but an additional challenge to the neighborhoods. And based on that, I think I would see the commission, in my imagination, approving the proposal here by staff tonight, because without this proposal in place, meanwhile, it still has to go through council, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Without this proposal in place, we're stuck with the state's permissive requirements, which were much more impactful than this. Meanwhile, if the staff and the commission and the citizens are able to come up with some improvements to limit the impacts on neighborhoods, we can always change what's in place, just so long as it doesn't violate the state law.
That is correct. It could be amended, as, again, Mark indicated in his written staff report, perhaps in his comments too, that our ordinance will need to be reviewed by HCD, State Housing and Community Development, and they have the authority to send it back if they do not find that it basically forwards the state mandate. So we have tried to be very thoughtful in our recommendations. Our sense is that the recommendations that we have before you tonight, we believe, would be supported by HCD. We can't guarantee that, but we believe that. I would also point out that in terms of the additional analysis that Mark mentioned regarding certain streets as far as safety concerns, there is a provision of the state law that allows us to look at that. We will, as Mark indicated, we will continue our work with police, fire, and public services, but I would say, to be a little bit cautionary on that, that strong rationale would need to be determined to basically exclude certain street segments or areas from this ordinance. So we will definitely continue that discussion, and as we have more information, we will, at your direction, bring that forward to the City Council based on whatever we find at that point. We are wanting to look at that, but my sense is that could be fairly limited in terms of excluding areas from applicability here, but we will look at that.
Okay, through the chair, Commissioner. Just to continue some comments on this, in your staff report, you have this map that shows areas of influence that virtually blanket the city that prohibit limiting an accessory unit's additional need for parking. So in many respects, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to get an accessory unit in every other street shortly that's not going to be required to put additional parking. If I think of my street and several other streets in my neighborhood, if we get an accessory unit in every street, that's just going to be one less parking space where there are no parking spaces right now.
Exactly correct.
And what that does is eventually pit neighbor against neighbor, which is not good. That's going to have an impact on quality of life. This is the way I see it. Wait, I'm almost here. So this is potentially a huge impact. And to think of it another way, and there are two ways to look at it. You know, oh, this is terrible. It's going to have an impact on quality of life. It could impact every neighborhood in town. The other way is there are people sitting in their homes right now who are having trouble meeting their needs. They're having economic problems. So this is a way that they can designate, say, 150 feet of their house and get in an additional significant amount of money every month, like clockwork. Well, that's great. For people who need that, I can see how if this is the rules of operation, that's what they're going to get. On the other hand, to liken it to something that everyone, I think, is pretty familiar with now, if there is an easy way to give a one-word description to this, it's the Uberization of housing. It's B&B come home to roost, and it's a very large bird. So it's going to be a big challenge. And as long as the state has legislatures that pass laws that require us to follow those laws and make accessory units available, we're stuck until enough people are impacted enough that they go after their state legislatures and say, hello, enough is enough. I think many people, just to address the historical aspects, some of us here are old enough to remember and some of us won't remember, but there was a time where people were building a lot of second units without permits, then people began to become concerned about what this was doing to the neighbors. There were rules established for second units, and there were very little second units left in San Bruno that were in addition to the ones that already exist. And what this will do is bring back that increase in second units. But at one time, it's almost like a cyclical thing. People are happy to see him, then they realize it's not such a good deal. Now they see it again, and they may realize it's not such a good deal. But if you go into San Francisco, I visited some of the neighborhoods I used to live in, and it's very, very much more crowded. Very crowded. Finding a parking space is like gold, and garage rents are very high. So I can see, I was going to ask staff a question that I think is unfair in a way. I was going to say, what if we have 20% of the 10,000 houses in San Bruno take advantage of accessory dwelling units? How many cars do you think that would add to the city's parking on the streets? And the answer to that is very, needlessly hypothetical. But my point is that it could add 2,500 to 5,000 more cars to the streets, depending on whether there's one car or two cars. I can't imagine. I remember when I was a pup, I was looking for a place to live. I always had a roommate or two or three because it made it so much more economical, and that's very likely what's going to happen to some of these things. So that's my thinking. I think we're stuck with this for now. I think we're in big trouble if we don't pass this now to give us some kind of defense against the state. And I'll relinquish my
Thank you, Barry.
time to this.
Through the
to
chair.
the chair.
Commissioner.
Just one last comment. I'm in Sacramento a lot, doing legislation for lots of different things. And I think that this is one place that I haven't done lobbying. And I think that when these situations come up, I don't know how that we can't possibly be informed about every bill that comes up, but I think that there is some opportunity here that they take public hearing at all levels. And I certainly would be at that doorstep when I feel strongly about something, and I do feel strongly, and I completely, you did a good presentation. And I would like to be more informed when these come up. I don't know how you know about, you can't possibly be in all the pieces, but you're probably the closest to us having information. And, but at least giving us the opportunity to hear about these things and getting that chance to lobby. I'm in Sacramento tomorrow lobbying another matter, so if there's any chance of that, I would like that.
Joe, anything? Good. Okay. Mark, I'd like to say thank you for your hard work. I've seen this, the last version and this one, there's been a lot of effort and time put into this. I guess it's basically damage control is what we're looking at. I mean, I see the pictures of what Mary's got next door, and it's probably at the upper limit of what would be allowed. And to not take action to kind of control it as best we can at this point, I think would be irresponsible. So,
That's correct.
Anyway, anyone else have a comment? No? Good. Should we open this?
Make a motion?
Not yet.
No.
We got to do public comment
Oh,
first, right?
sorry, excuse me.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll open up public comment. If there's anyone here who'd like to speak on this, please step to the podium and once again give us your name. And we're going to limit it to 3 minutes apiece.
Jim Evangelist. I would like to know, I don't think this is under your purview, but what the city government's going to do to cope with the additional workload of monitoring these new units that will be coming on board. I worked for the city for quite a few years, and I can't tell you how often I already saw people going in a side gate into the back of the property. What is the city going to do to stop these they will start to do unpermitted units because it's cheaper, they can get away with a lot more. The city should be required to put a large amount of resources and manpower to make sure that since this is an imposition by the state, for whatever reason, that it's done properly for our community so that the quality of life isn't impacted any more than necessary. Thanks.
David?
A quick comment on that. Actually, the way the state mandate is set up, it really encourages, I think, that people come in and get the necessary permits. There is a real advantage to the property owner to go through the process, get a building permit, do this legally, and be in a position where they can provide the in-law unit, the unit for a family member, the rental, et cetera, within the purview of the law with benefit of a permit. As you saw in the state legislation, one big savings for the property owner is in the area of utilities. There is not a requirement for, in most cases, for new connection fees as a new unit. That's a big difference. So I guess what I would say in response to that comment is that actually I think we would expect that more people would want to come through the legal and proper process, take advantage of the lower thresholds and costs, get a legal ADU, and then be able to use it accordingly.
Thank you. Sir?
So one question is, if this is a state law, does this mean that basically a place like Hillsborough can have like all these ADUs pop up all over the place? And that's a possibility, and any other town, I'm just mentioning that as hypothetical. That's my first question, if anybody.
Again, through the chair, I'd be happy to respond. Yes, it is a state law, and other communities, including Hillsborough, Woodside, et cetera, will need to conform. And there are these basic provisions that we're talking about and limited areas for discretion, but yes, they will need to conform as well.
So the other thing I wanted to express concern and echo your concern, Ms. Johnson and Mr. Peterson, is that when we moved in here, we really liked our house, we really liked our yard. It felt like it was a community, although we didn't actually look at the street as a whole until we actually moved in. And when we looked at the street as a whole, as we moved in and we were walking around with our daughter and everything, we started noticing, for example, towards the end of Maple, it's basically all apartment complexes, which I guess must have been built in one of those cyclical periods that Mr. Peterson was mentioning. And those aren't considered ADUs, right? Those apartment complexes that were built. So the ADUs would be an additional thing that would happen in those houses that are on a street that maybe, are like ours, that are a house with a lawn, and people would then build there. In addition to the fact that because of these apartment complexes, there is no parking on Maple whatsoever if you come too late at night. So my wife and I, we each have one car, and then the garage is from another era, so it's hard to fit modern day cars into it. So, we park one car in the driveway, and we're constantly trying to reserve a spot on the street so that we can park there. And I can imagine that your concerns are very valid, that these conditions will get even worse with something like this. That's just what I wanted to comment on.
Through the chair, the ADUs would only be allowed in single-family homes, in residential areas and lots that have single-family homes. They wouldn't be allowed on multifamily lots.
Through the chair. They also have to meet all this other criteria that you read off earlier, Mark, which was, 1 mile of the public transit. There's a lot of other criteria too. So it's just not quite as easy, but yes, to have, and I don't know how many ADUs can you put on one, someone has a huge piece of property, or
Only
is only
one.
one?
One
Only
per lot,
So they were basically the old nanny or housekeeper units, the pool rooms, the changing rooms.
Right.
Which is,
And again, through the chair, if we could clarify too, that in terms of an existing single-family residential unit, given housing costs and our regional economy, we're already finding that people are renting rooms, inviting family members to join them in homes. So in a sense, within the existing units, we're seeing sharing, kind of talking about the comment that Commissioner Peterson had earlier, kind of this sharing of a home. And then in terms of, say, an accessory, a detached ADU, keep in mind that the property owner would need to meet development standards as far as setbacks, lot coverage, et cetera. So there would be some limitation there as well.
through the chair.
Commissioner?
There are many times before the commission that applicants have come through and that we have very purposely looked at these applications and to be sure that there were going to be a secondary unit, that it was going to be a whole family unit, taking down walls between units. How will all that play out? I'm not asking you to answer that, but it is a potential situation that they might meet all the criteria, but now we have so carefully looked at those areas, and this sort of changes that. I mean, it's been there for a long time. This is not the first time, but it's truly on the table.
Well, they would have to apply specifically for an accessory dwelling unit, for one thing, and if they met all the criteria, the check boxes, then it would be approved ministerially. But if it required going to the planning commission, then it would not qualify as a secondary unit, as an accessory
An easier
dwelling
way
unit.
out.
What's that?
Almost feels like an easier way out, in its own way.
We're still having a public hearing, right?
Correct.
Okay, just checking.
We done? Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you. John Lynch. Just a couple of comments, and I just want to take a little negativity off the secondary dwelling unit, what do you want to call it now? They've been around for a long time. They used to be called granny units. It was a place where you would put a parent or grandparent legally within the home rather than shoving them into a rest home that's filthy or across town or in another city. That was kind of the idea of it. It's not just for greedy landlords or whatever making bucks. So, it's a quality of life thing too. You're able to have a parent or a special needs person live on site with you in this legal unit. Having said that, parking. Well, we live in the Bay Area, born and raised here too, Perry. Parking is a premium. We're not going to get any more of it. All our kids are moving back home from college because they can't afford to live anywhere, so cars are going to be everywhere. My two informed me that they're coming back. So I have 2 additional cars. Everybody else in the neighborhood's parking in front of my house because I have a large frontage. It is what it is. I can't do anything about it. Read this morning that YouTube wants to build another building in the parking lot over here in Bay Hill. That's not going to create any more demand for housing, is it? Question? That's all. The granny unit or the in-law unit is not a bad thing, as long as it's monitored and, so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else?
I'll echo John that it's not a bad thing. I just think it needs to be managed as best we can under the current law. I'd like to ask, and this is just a question for everyone, I wonder when a city like Hillsborough or Burlingame decides to basically sue the state or put up their hands and say, we don't want this, not the way it's written. And because of that, I think that it's prudent of us not to rush into this if we don't have to. So, David, you said there are 5 permits. Those came over in 2 weeks this year, and there were 5 permits all last year. So we can assume if we go at the same rate that we're going to see 100 permits or 110 permits by the end of the year. Math may be not accurate, but or maybe more than that once we start approving them. But you haven't approved the 5 yet, right?
We have not, through the chair, we have not approved them yet, but, you know, as you saw in the state law, we're, again, directed, mandated, required to process them within a specified period of time. So, again, like, as a staff recommendation, we have tried to balance interests. We've made a recommendation to our Planning Commission, and we are looking for the Planning Commission's recommendation this evening. Thank you.
Okay. So the law went into effect on the 1st of January, and here we are on the 17th. We haven't approved 5 permits. I'm just wondering why we couldn't wait a little longer. The one area that's most concerning to me is this area on safety, endangerment of public safety. And you've mentioned that you have the fire department, the police department, and public works looking into this. Where do the residents of those neighborhoods fall? I mean, do we have a voice in that? Because you heard from Steve earlier today and myself that it's not only are we concerned about the fire engines and the police cars being able to get down our already crowded blocks, but what about the people who live there already being able to maneuver the sidewalks and the streets? I think that we need a voice in that equation as well. David?
Again, I respond to the commission, and again, we made a recommendation to the commission this evening. I think that our processes are noticed, they're public, we invite public comments and discussion, and we look to our decision makers to give us direction on how to proceed. We've given you a couple of options tonight. I'm looking to the commission to provide us with direction. Thank you.
Wow.
I'm going to have to ask you to make it quick because we're...
Okay, all right. I would like to be a part of that conversation. We all talked about kind of some of the places that we live. I mean, I live on Mastic. The other day I got home at 7 o'clock at night, and there wasn't a parking spot that was within 2 blocks of my house. My wife sometimes comes home late at night, and there's not a place for her to park today. So I really ask that you all consider these neighborhoods. And I'm not sure why we rush into approving these permits today when we've already waited the 2 weeks. It might be more prudent to wait a couple more weeks to get the safety recommendations back on your desk and then look at this again. And like I say, I am sure that there will be cities that will do everything they can to stave this off and possibly take legal matters up with the state. I'm not sure why we wouldn't wait and maybe move in on their coattails. Thank you very much for your time.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Is there anyone else in the public who'd like to speak this evening? Okay, public comment is closed. I do sympathize with you. I live in the neighborhood where you do, and I live in a circumstance where parking has gotten worse and worse and worse. So when I make a decision, it will be with that in mind. So please don't think we sit here and don't have personal experience in that as well.
Thank you, Rick, and I appreciate your comments.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Mark, thank you once again. Well done. Very difficult project, and I appreciate your hard work. Thank you. Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission for comments, motions.
Well,
Go ahead.
through the
Please.
chair. I know that there was some comment that we could actually delay this or continue it, and I don't know what that would accomplish. So I'm trying to think about our options and what would be our plan of action should we continue it. I don't, it doesn't, unless someone is prepared to really create a project out of this, I don't see the continuance going to be to our benefit. As much as it's not one of my favorite things to go towards, but And I also want to make the comment that this was not about the granny unit, wasn't about the nanny unit, it was about the best practices. And that was really what I was after, best practices from the state. I'm very disappointed. And granny units and all of those are absolutely serve a purpose. So I want to be sure I go on record with that.
Through the chair?
Were you done, Mayor?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, very good.
Sorry.
It's okay.
No, did I interrupt you? I'm
No,
sorry.
you did not.
Okay. If you think this is lots of fun, I don't know how many people listen to the news or public radio on housing. It's not likely to displace sports as an interesting topic, but as a practical matter, the state requires every city to make a housing plan that shows where more housing can be built every year. They're not really required to take action to make that happen. They just have to say there is space for additional development. Now, there's significant movement to get the legislature to require a city to show why they didn't actually build those additional units. So all those people who are moving to California from the rest of the country and overseas, they want their houses. So my opinion remains the same. I think staff did an outstanding job from the first time we saw this subject to reworking it for tonight. I feel, and I think it's pretty much been demonstrated by the presentations tonight, that we're required to comply with state law, which is a much higher amount of permissiveness of larger additional units and less parking, unless we put our own ordinance into place. Once we take an action on this, it goes to the city council where more public input is permitted. And it's to the point, it's very valuable there simply because they're the ones who actually pass or fail an ordinance. But for our part, I'd like to make a motion to introduce the ordinance, or introduce the resolution, waive the reading, and call for a roll call vote on resolution recommending the City Council adopt a proposed ordinance amending Title 12 of the Municipal Code as set forth in the staff report.
With the one correction that staff mentioned earlier.
In other words, to accept the staff's recommendation for resolution.
With the adjustment that they had mentioned earlier.
Oh, right, with the correction of that one point.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Before we go any further, Mary, did you have any comments?
No, the only comment I would add is that we have already actually continued this once from our December meeting. And
Exactly.
I don't know that anything is going to be served by continuing to kind of kick the can down the road and be under the state law, which we have been since January 1st and are currently. So.
Thank you. Joe, is there anything you'd like to add?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Chair Biasotti,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kayal,
Aye.
Commissioner Samud, Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right,
Chair, may I say one more thing?
of course.
I really want to acknowledge the public for remaining, I don't know that you came for this topic or not, but you remained, and thank you for your input, your thinking. It's really important to us as commissioners to hear the pros and cons of a project, and your input and your experience. It means a lot to us to be able to make good decisions. And this is one time they couldn't the old saying that it's not in my backyard, but it is now. Someone's backyard.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you all for coming too. It makes our job much more satisfying when we see that there's actually people out there that are interested in we're doing something for our community. Sometimes we don't like what we have to do, but we like to make sure that we hear what everyone has to say, and everyone should feel welcome to come speak before us. So thank you for taking the time to come down and speak to us this evening. Okay, with that, we'll move to item 6A, city staff's discussion.
Chair Biasotti, under 6A, we're looking for volunteers for the next Architecture Review Committee meeting. Commissioner Peterson is a volunteer. Vice Chair Kayal. And one more, please.
Kevin Chase?
I will.
What's that? Kevin Chase?
I will put down Kevin Chase.
If he
Commissioner
can't do it, I'll
Chase.
do it.
And is there an alternate?
I'll do it if he can't do
Okay.
it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The next item on our agenda is the Planning Commission discussion. We put this here, really, it's really a thank you. It's a thank you going back to our last meeting where we had, I thought, a very good discussion about our downtown. We talked about the survey. We really appreciated your comments, and your comments we've gathered. We will be forwarding those on to our city manager and city council. So really a thank you to all of you for participating and offering so much good information. Something not on the agenda I'd like to remind you about. I believe you received notices, and it's the upcoming meeting on Monday, January 23rd at 6:30 p.m. at the San Bruno Senior Center here. And it has to do with an invitation extended to all of you to listen to the recommendations that would be going forward to our city council at their February 14th meeting regarding the community facilities planning effort that's been going on for some time now, started by really the San Bruno Community Foundation back in 2015 with their listening campaign, looking at the funds from PG&E and how those funds earmarked at $50 million could be spent for community facilities here in San Bruno. At this point, the list has been narrowed. You may have attended a couple of the forums that were held recently, and the list has been narrowed more to a couple of areas. But coming out of the listening campaign and going into the forums, the community has been looking at the possibility of a swimming pool replacement, a recreation center replacement of a library, and possibly a new community center. As a result of the forums kind of reaching out to the community, it seems that two projects are moving to the top, and one is a combined pool complex with recreational facility, kind of a reconstruction at City Park, and the other one that's being looked at has to do with a library and community center. At the meeting at 6:30 on Monday, January 23rd, the results of this study and the public outreach will be shared with all of you, and the City Council and San Bruno Community Foundation would be looking for your thoughts and comments in trying to prepare for the February 14th meeting of City Council, where City Council will receive the recommendations of the group that has put this together with the benefit of your comments. So that's all I have this evening, and thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And actually, I think there's something missing in city staff discussion. We need to pick a new chair. I think
If
it's
we
that
could do
time.
that,
As much as I like the ego and sitting up here and banging a gavel on the table, I do think it's time for a new chair.
I think it is time for a new chair. The only thing is, if you don't mind, if you could hold off one meeting so that we could put it on the agenda.
Very well.
If you wouldn't mind. And I apologize, we'll put that on the next agenda.
Very good.
So that officially you can transfer the gavel there.
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much.
Right, well, with that, we're adjourned till February
Wait.
12th. What?
Can we have any planning commission discussion?
Oh, okay. Perry, go ahead.
I hate to say it, but I'd like to ask staff if you would have any suggestion other than agendizing an item for reviewing the Victory automobile dealer permit for revocation.
If I could respond through the chair on that and give a little bit of background. We did receive information from community members. We did review this with our city attorney, and we did send out a letter after a complete review of the use permit that was referred to earlier this evening. We identified areas where we thought as well that there may be non-compliance. We have asked the property owner, the business owner, I should say, to address these matters, and we'll confer further with our city attorney, and based on both the letter that went out to the business owner and further discussions with the city attorney, we'll get back to you with appropriate action. So I heard your request, and I'll work through the city attorney and bring it back to you as I'm directed by the city attorney.
Okay, I'd like to add my testimony in that I've spoken to people about this matter, and it doesn't sound good, the treatment that the neighborhood has been receiving from that business. And I think very highly of the business in the respect that I can see they're doing a great job of selling cars. But the neighbors are subject to a lot of noise and a lot of light in after-hours environment, and I think I'd like to ask the staff to take a look at the lighting at night and think about that when you discuss it with them.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Commissioner,
Thank you, Chair.
were you requesting that be?
No, I was asking them whether that would be a subject or whether they have some views on it.
Would you like them to bring that back as an agenda item?
I'd just like to hear from staff what their views are, and they said they were going to provide
Okay,
that
if you
next meeting.
could provide us at our next meeting, that would be great.
I'd be happy to do that. I'll,
Thank you.
again, as I indicated, review the matter further with our city attorney. I've given you kind of an update to date. We'll review it with our city attorney, and I'll provide a report at your next meeting.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Commissioner. Thank you for bringing that up. I was thinking it earlier and forgot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Joe, thank you for staying so late. I know you wanted to get home earlier, but thank you for your efforts.
Let's go.
We're out of here. All right, we are adjourned till February 21st.
Thank you.